Hello, welcome to the channel Y Stories. Enjoy watching.
In the VIP room, a wealthy patient pointed his finger at an orderly, accusing her of stealing medicine. He ordered the chief physician to pull the evidence out of her backpack, but when it was opened, everyone froze. It happened in an instant and caught everyone off guard. Loud chatter in the hallway immediately fell silent when 40-year-old Arturo Alvarez, one of the wealthiest patients in the prestigious private clinic, suddenly shouted at full volume, pointing at a young orderly named Barbara. He was so agitated that beads of sweat appeared on his forehead and his eyes narrowed as if he had seen something absolutely dreadful. His shout pierced the air of the room, stopping even passers-by in their tracks. "It was her. I'm sure it was her," cried Arturo Alvarez, sitting up so abruptly that his forearm nearly ripped from his arm. "Who?" asked the clinic director, Benjamin Benitez, a man in his 50s with a neatly trimmed gray beard and a stern expression. "That orderly." Arturo pointed at Barbara, who stood off to the side with a backpack slung over her shoulder. "She stole my medication." "I know it." Barbara, 29 years old, with brown eyes and short light brown hair, froze in embarrassment. She had just been about to leave the room after cleaning and never expected such an attack from a patient. Dressed in everyday pants and a t-shirt under a white coat, she looked like an ordinary young woman, petite, slim, with a confident yet gentle posture. "Wait. What do you mean stole the medicine?" Barbara was stunned, glancing at the director, searching for support or at least a hint that this absurdity would soon end. "Exactly that," insisted Arturo Alvarez. "Ask her what's in her backpack. I saw her open it and hide something." A curious crowd began to gather. Doctors, nurses, even someone from the accounting office peeked out. The wealthy and temperamental patient, also known for donating generously to the clinic, had suddenly decided the young orderly had stolen expensive drugs. Everyone immediately sensed the seriousness of the situation. "Senor Alvarez," said the director calmly, approaching the patient's bed, "let's not cause panic. Tell me, what medication is missing and when did you notice?" "The ones prescribed by Professor Borrego. They're worth a fortune. And suddenly they were gone from my nightstand." "And who was the last to leave the room?" Arturo squinted angrily at Barbara. "Her." Barbara felt her heart pounding in her throat. Each word from the patient felt like a sentence. She knew that if she didn't defend herself now, her reputation would be ruined in seconds. Still, something inside her resisted shouting or panicking. Maybe because she had never faced such accusations before. I didn't steal anything," she said quietly, trying to sound confident, though her voice trembled. "I was just cleaning the floor, then I was going to take out the trash." "Sure, we know how you clean floors." Arturo snapped, his normally black eyebrows furrowing deeply as his hands clenched the bed sheet. "Those meds cost a fortune. I won't allow any staff to mess with my things." Benjamin Benitez sighed. He knew a scandal was unavoidable. This wasn't just any patient, he was an investor who could either donate significantly or pull his financial support if offended. He had a reputation too. Once, he had threatened to sue another clinic over poor service. If he decided his medicine was stolen here, the reputational damage would be catastrophic. "Barbara," the director turned to the orderly, trying to keep a neutral tone, "would you mind showing us what's in your backpack?" She flinched. "Why should I have to show my backpack? I didn't take anything." "You can check the cameras," asked the nurses. "I'm sure we can review the recordings. But to calm the patient here and now, the best thing would be to show that you have nothing," Benjamin suggested. Did he realize this violated personal boundaries? Of course he did, but the patient was pushing hard, and the situation was critical. "If you truly have nothing suspicious, this will clear up everything immediately." "Great idea," Arturo added with sarcasm. "Open the backpack." Barbara hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. It seemed like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Arturo, arms crossed, radiated the smug confidence of someone convinced he was a victim. He demanded a public interrogation. "All right," she whispered. "All right." With effort, she removed the backpack and handed it to the director. A shadow of dread passed over her face. The doctor took the bag cautiously, glancing briefly at Arturo and the staff crowded in the doorway, as if to say, "You're all witnesses. Go ahead," the patient urged. "Take things out one by one so it's transparent." Benjamin unzipped the bag, and suddenly everyone in the room froze. Inside was something no one expected, a bag stuffed with cash, several envelopes, some photographs, and on top, a small teddy bear with a torn-off paw. No sign of the missing medicine. But the strange item stunned the crowd. What is this?" asked the director, pulling out the cash. Arturo looked equally shocked. "What the hell? Where are my meds?" "I don't know where that money or the photos came from," Barbara stammered. She had gone pale. This isn't mine. I just grabbed the backpack from the locker room. I'm in shock." "Wait," interrupted a young male nurse, Bernardo, who stepped inside. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe someone switched the bag." "Switched it?" Arturo snapped. "She could have packed it herself. Look at all that cash. Maybe she sold my meds on the black market and got paid." "Don't talk nonsense," Barbara shouted, adrenaline surging. "Why would I do that? I have a decent salary. Why would I steal your medicine or carry cash like that? It makes no sense." She stepped forward as if to snatch the bag back but stopped, realizing that would only make things worse. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes shone with pride and outrage. "Calm down, everyone," Benjamin Benitez tried to mediate while the staff held their breath. "We'll figure this out. Barbara, when did you last see your backpack?" "Before I went up to this floor. I left it in the locker room, as always," she said hoarsely. "Then I went to get cleaning supplies and came here. I don't know when this stuff could have been put inside. Or maybe you're just making that up," Arturo sneered. "My meds are gone, fact. You have strange bundles of money, fact. The connection seems obvious." "Hold on." Benjamin raised a hand. "The money could belong to anyone. What matters now is locating the missing medication. It's expensive, and the patient can't continue treatment without it." The tension in the room was palpable. Staff whispered in the hallway, some filming discreetly. Such drama was rare in the clinic. "Look at this," Bernardo said, holding up one of the photos from the bag. It showed Barbara with a man in his 40s, sitting at a table with bookshelves behind them. "Do you know him?" Barbara gulped, eyes wide. "That's my ex-partner Daniel. But I didn't put that photo in the bag. You have to believe me." "So someone broke into your bag and planted old photos of you with your ex?" "Sounds crazy," Arturo said skeptically. Barbara blushed. "Yes, crazy. But why would I bring that photo here? We ended things long ago." "And the teddy bear?" asked the nurse. "No idea," Barbara raised her hands. "I had a similar one as a child, but mine was lost years ago. And it didn't have a torn paw." Bernardo, inspecting the bear, frowned. "Look, the paw wasn't just torn, it was carefully removed. Maybe there's something inside?" "Exactly," the director agreed, though hesitating. Still, the situation demanded answers. He carefully opened the paw and found a small packet of white powder. Everyone froze, then gasped. "Drugs?" one of the nurses exclaimed. "What the hell?" "Barbara," the director said coldly. "Can you explain this?" She shook her head, trying not to cry. "I don't know how they got there. I swear I have nothing to do with drugs, or the money, or the photos." "Well, now it's clear," Arturo sneered. "She either framed someone or she's a dealer. Damn it, maybe she sold my meds too." "Stop accusing me." Barbara nearly screamed. "I don't sell drugs. I didn't steal your damn medicine. I don't even understand what's happening." The director sighed deeply. He didn't want to interrogate her in front of an audience. Turning to the staff, he spoke firmly. "Please, everyone, disperse. There's no show here. This is an internal clinic matter." Then, eyeing the nearby security guard, he added, "Call administration. And if necessary, call the police. We need to launch a formal investigation." "The police?" gasped Barbara. "But I didn't." "Barbara, I understand this is hard for you right now." The hospital director looked at her with a serious and slightly sorrowful gaze, but the situation has gone too far. Expensive medications have disappeared, that's a fact. Money, photographs, and a bag of unidentified powder were found in your backpack, also a fact. We have to act in accordance with the law. Barbara sank heavily onto the chair by the hospital room wall. She looked as if she were about to faint, her eyes filled with tears. She knew that if the police arrived now and accused her of drug possession, her career at the clinic would be over and her life could be ruined, even if she eventually proved her innocence. "Listen," Bernardo spoke up, trying to ease the tension at least a little. "Let's wait for the police, check the security footage, talk to people in the locker room. Maybe Barbara's backpack really was switched, or someone planted all those things in it." Of course, everyone says that now," Arturo Alvarez sneered. "And where are my medications?" "I don't care, find them." He leaned back against his pillow, clearly exhausted by his own anger and relishing the scene. He liked being the center of attention, watching everything revolve around him, and that the potential culprit had no way to defend herself. His word was law. He was rich, and that meant he should get whatever he wanted. The hospital director briefly spoke with security, asking one staff member to call the police and another to go to the surveillance room to review the footage. At the same time, he instructed a colleague to ensure no one left the staff locker room in hopes of finding possible witnesses. Barbara remained seated in the corner, her head buried in her hands. "Listen, Barbara," Bernardo said quietly, leaning closer so no one else could hear, "I haven't known you long, but you seem like a decent person. If you say you didn't take anything, I believe you." "Thank you," she sobbed, lifting her eyes slightly. "But how can I prove I'm innocent now?" "First, you need to calm down," the young nurse advised. "Then think about who could have planted all that and why. Personally, I don't think this is a coincidence. Maybe," she swallowed the lump in her throat. "But why me? I don't have any enemies. Try to remember anything unusual in the last few days. Did someone act strange, mention you, ask questions?" She furrowed her brow, trying to concentrate through the haze of fear and tears. "Nothing comes to mind." At that moment, the clinic's administrative manager walked into the room, a tall man named Diego, with a stern expression and a notebook in hand. He gave the scene a sharp look before saying, "All right, the police are on their way. To avoid turning this into a spectacle, let's all move to the conference room. The patient will stay here, and Barbara will come with me under supervision." "Fine," the hospital director nodded, trying to keep everything by the book. "Arturo Alvarez, please wait until the police complete their inspection. Maybe your medication will be found." "I hope so," the man replied condescendingly with a cold smile. "But I'll file a complaint if this doesn't resolve in my favor." "Of course, we're aware," the hospital director replied flatly, fully understanding the delicate situation. With trembling hands, Barbara adjusted her white coat and followed Diego and Bernardo out of the room. On her way out, she caught glimpses of other staff whispering about her. Some looked at her with sympathy, others with open suspicion. Unspoken verdicts had already been passed. She walked through them in a daze, not knowing how to defend herself. Once everyone was in the small conference room, Diego shut the door behind them, and a security guard stood outside, clearly to prevent Barbara from escaping, though she had no such intention. Inside were the hospital director, Administrator Diego, Nurse Bernardo, and Barbara herself. "All right then," Diego sat at the large table, spreading out some papers and pulling out a pen. "Let's go over the facts. Barbara, please tell us everything you know and remember about this incident." She took a deep breath, trying to collect her thoughts. As usual, I came to work at 9 a.m., changed into my uniform, and left my backpack in the locker room. Another cleaner, Dolores, I think, was finishing her shift there. I greeted her, she replied. Then I went to the first floor, picked up my cleaning cart, set everything up, and headed to the 5th floor since I had VIP room cleaning scheduled and a few offices nearby. I entered Arturo Alvarez's room. He was in a bad mood from the start, said he hadn't slept well. I started dusting and mopping the floor. "Did you touch his nightstand?" Diego asked while writing. I wiped the top, but I didn't open the drawers. As always, I did my wet cleaning. I see no reason to go through a patient's personal belongings. That took about 15 minutes. Then a nurse came in with some pills. I said goodbye to the patient and left. Immediately after that, the hospital director interrupted. "No, I went to the hallway first to throw away the trash bag I collected from the room, and that's when I heard him shouting. Then he stormed out and saw me with my backpack." "Did you go back for your backpack on purpose?" Bernardo clarified. "Yes, I remembered I left my phone in it." Barbara blushed, realizing how suspicious it might look. "I needed to call my mom. She's in another hospital, seriously ill. So I went back, grabbed the phone and took the backpack too since I planned to have some tea in the break room later." "And when you picked up the backpack, you didn't notice anything strange?" Diego asked. "No," she shook her head. "I didn't even open it, just slung it over my shoulder. It didn't feel particularly heavy. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, just thinking about calling my mom." "All right," the administrator scribbled some notes. "So, you returned to the floor and the patient started accusing you?" "Yes, he shouted that I stole the medication. Then the director asked me to show the contents of my backpack. I agreed. And, well, you saw how it ended." The man glanced at the hospital director, inviting him to ask his questions. The director cleared his throat. "Barbara, how do you explain the photo of you and your ex-husband found in the backpack?" "I have no idea." She covered her face with her hands, her head pounding with stress. "We broke up over a year ago. I don't keep any of his photos. Maybe there's one or two in old albums at home, but definitely not in my backpack." "Is he in any way connected to drugs?" Diego asked bluntly. "I honestly don't know what he's up to now." Barbara's eyes welled with despair. "When we separated, he had debt problems, but drugs? I've never heard of that. Have you had contact with him recently?" "Not since March last year. He left town, or at least, that's what he said." Diego made a note inside. "All right, the police will be here shortly to take an official statement. Until then, I ask that you stay here, Barbara. I hope you understand?" "I understand," she answered wearily. "I have no choice." Silence fell in the room, heavy and suffocating. Everyone seemed lost in thought about what might happen next. Bernardo drummed his fingers on the table, the director flipped through some documents, and Diego checked his phone. Barbara felt like her world had turned upside down, and she couldn't wake up from this nightmare. "Here's what I think," Diego finally spoke, addressing the hospital director. "We need to regain the VIP patient's trust as soon as possible and find out who's really involved. Otherwise, the clinic's reputation is at stake." "I agree," nodded Benjamin Benitez. "I've already called our security department. They're checking all camera footage and locker room access." Barbara looked up instinctively. "I hope the cameras show everything. Someone could have broken in, switched my backpack, or planted those things." "If the cameras are working, they will," Bernardo reassured her. "Let's hope you're right." A few minutes later, the door opened slightly and the same security guard announced the police had arrived. The hospital director and administrator exchanged glances and went to meet them, leaving Barbara and Bernardo in the room. Barbara buried her head in her arms and began to cry quietly. Bernardo gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Hey, don't cry," he said softly. "I believe that if you're innocent, the truth will come out." "And what if it doesn't?" She sobbed. "You saw that money, that packet. It all looks so bad. I know, the young man nodded, but I still believe the truth will surface. People who do this kind of thing usually overlook security cameras and witnesses. Barbara looked at him gratefully through her tears and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. She felt like Bernardo was the only one who still stood by her, and that sparked a flicker of hope in her heart. Soon, the hospital director returned with 2 uniformed police officers. They were calm but alert. One, who introduced himself as Captain Lorenzo, studied Barbara intently as if trying to read her emotions. The younger one kept checking his notepad, jotting down key points. "Good afternoon," Captain Lorenzo said curtly. "We received a report of stolen high-value medication and the discovery of suspicious items with an employee. Let's sort this out step by step." Diego immediately took the lead and told the officers everything, leaving out no detail. They listened, took down names, and made notes. Then they asked to see the evidence, the backpack, the money, the photographs, and the packet of powder. "It's all here." The director carefully took the items out of a sealed bag, already packed by the nurse for safekeeping. The officers examined the envelopes of cash, counted some of the bills, and exchanged concerned looks. One of them checked the powder but gave no comment. Clearly, lab testing would be required. "Miss," Captain Lorenzo turned to Barbara, "do these items belong to you?" "No, no," she exclaimed, her heart pounding. "Someone planted them. I don't know who or why." "So you admit the backpack is yours, but not the contents found inside?" "Yes, the backpack is mine. I carry my uniform and personal things in it, but I've never seen any of this before. Except maybe the photo, that's me with my ex-husband, but I didn't put it there." "I see," Lorenzo nodded without showing emotion. "We'll need to confiscate these items for further investigation and test the powder. We also need to question your ex-husband, if he's in town." "I don't know where he is," Barbara's voice broke. "We'll find him," Lorenzo said calmly. "Now, about the missing medication, the patient claims he saw you take it. But the drugs weren't found in your backpack. Where are they?" "I didn't take them," she said, her voice trembling. "Maybe someone else did." "That's logical," Lorenzo jotted down a note. "Can we review the surveillance footage?" "Yes, of course," the administrator replied. "I've already instructed the security team. Let's go to the monitoring room." They all headed to the security room in another wing of the building. Barbara walked a few steps behind, her eyes downcast, bracing herself for the worst. Bernardo didn't leave her side, trying to support her. The hospital director and the administrator were having a brief conversation with the police officers about the technical capabilities of the surveillance system. The security room was small but filled with monitors. 2 security staff were already sitting in front of the screens, scrolling through the archive from the past few hours. Everyone crowded around and started watching the monitors closely. There, one of the guards pointed at the screen. "That's the staff changing room, footage from 9 a.m. Look." On the screen appeared Barbara. She entered, left her backpack in a locker, closed it, and then exited. It was clearly visible how Barbara came in, took off her outerwear, placed the backpack inside, locked the locker with a small padlock, and left. For a while, no one else entered. "All quiet," the guard commented as he fast-forwarded the footage a bit. And here, at 10:03, another staff member enters. Can't tell who exactly. The person is wearing a mask. Everyone instinctively leaned closer to the screen. Indeed, someone in a medical mask and a lab coat, which was standard uniform, entered the changing room, glanced around quickly, and approached Barbara's locker. "How did he open it?" the captain asked tensely. It was clearly visible on the screen that the unknown person took something like a small pick or knife from his pocket, fiddled with the padlock, and it clicked open. Then the person carefully pulled out the backpack, unzipped it, put something inside, then opened, judging by the hand movements, probably an inner pocket as well, and finally placed everything back. He then closed the locker, reattached the padlock, clicked it shut, as if carefully covering the traces of tampering. "Damn," Diego muttered. "Everything is on tape, but the face is invisible. Not visible, confirmed the guard, fast-forwarding again. At 10:05, the person left, and no one else entered until Barbara returned. Everyone exchanged glances, and Barbara felt a wave of relief, like a ray of sunlight piercing the clouds. So it really was planted, she wasn't guilty. But at the same time, the realization hit her, the masked individual had hidden their identity, and proving who it was would not be easy. Hard to determine the height, commented a junior officer. But it looks like someone from the staff. He knew where the changing room was and wore a lab coat. Could be just white clothing though. But it looks medical, Captain Lorenzo clarified, thoughtfully stroking his chin. We need to check other corridor cameras, trace where he came from and where he went. Yes, let's take a look, replied the guard, switching to another camera. They started reviewing footage from the same time frame, hoping to spot the unknown person. However, it turned out he had chosen a route with blind spots or moved in a way that obscured his face. In some hallways, no one in a white coat and mask appeared at that time, and in others, people moved too quickly to identify faces. Interesting, Bernardo noted. Feels like he knew the camera layout in advance. Looks that way, sighed the hospital director. So it's likely someone on the inside. Yes, most likely someone well-informed, concluded Captain Lorenzo. We'll investigate. But at least it's clear now that Barbara didn't plant the items herself. Barbara exhaled, as if breathing properly for the first time all morning. She looked gratefully at the officers, Bernardo, and the hospital director. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, the captain said. We still have to find out who did this and why. We also need to look into the missing medication for patient Arturo Alvarez. Yes, of course, Diego nodded. It's likely all connected. The police decided to return to the meeting room to finish the paperwork. Barbara was allowed to stay at work for now but was asked not to leave the clinic and to remain available, as she was still considered a witness or a potential suspect until the real culprit was found. By noon, Arturo Alvarez, having learned that his medication wasn't found in the nurse's backpack, began to raise his voice again and demanded that the clinic either reimburse him or provide a new supply immediately. The hospital director responded calmly, saying everything would be clarified soon and that no one was denying responsibility, but the investigation had to conclude first. Meanwhile, the scandal threatened to break out publicly, as the patient threatened to report it to the Ministry of Health and spread the story in the press about how medicine was being stolen in a luxury clinic. In the corridors, whispers flew. They say Barbara was using drugs. No, the cameras showed she was framed. Or maybe she's working with someone. Hey, you should have seen her face when they found the money, pure shock. And so on. The rumors grew, spreading rapidly. Someone claimed to have seen Barbara speaking with a suspicious man near the clinic's back entrance a few days ago. Someone else said they overheard her shouting on the phone about debts. One way or another, the atmosphere among the staff was tense. Barbara, alone in a small utility room, tried to call her mother, but she didn't answer. Barbara thought her mother might be undergoing tests and then realized it was even hard to hold the phone. Her hands were shaking. Bernardo soon entered after knocking on the door. "How are you?" he asked softly, closing the door behind him. "How?" "Terrible," Barbara replied, leaning against the wall and closing her eyes to stop herself from crying again. "Listen, the most important thing right now is to stay strong and not panic. We already know you were framed. The police have seen the footage, that means the truth is on your side. But who would do this, Bernardo?" She looked at him pleadingly. "I've never hurt anyone, never got into conflicts." "I don't know," Bernardo looked down. "Maybe you have enemies you don't even know about. Or maybe someone's trying to distract attention from themselves, so they're setting you up?" Barbara shook her head. Enemies? She had always tried to get along with everyone, took extra shifts to help colleagues, was friendly with the nurses. Lately, she'd worked even more because of her mother's illness and the need for money. But someone going this far against her? Bernardo lowered his voice. "I'm not an investigator, but let's think logically. The patient's expensive medication disappeared. Option 1, someone from the staff stole it to sell. Option 2, someone wanted to make you look guilty. Maybe someone who knew the patient is hot-tempered and would quickly find someone to blame. Possibly, Barbara whispered. But I don't know who. Bernardo gave a sad smile. I understand. But we'll have to get to the bottom of this. I'll help you however I can. Thank you, Barbara touched his hand. You're the only one who stood by me. He nodded encouragingly, and they fell into a moment of quiet, sharing a sense of solidarity and understanding. Meanwhile, at the other end of the corridor, a different conversation was happening. The hospital director and administrator Diego were trying to decide how to deal with Arturo Alvarez to keep the scandal from blowing up. Tension filled the staff room. If he files a complaint, we'll be in serious trouble, Diego said, rubbing his temples. Our reputation is at stake. I understand, the hospital director nodded. But what can we do? The medication is missing, and he thinks we've lost control. Maybe the clinic could buy him a new batch. Diego suggested. That's a huge expense. We don't have a budget line for that, and the patient's insurance doesn't cover the full cost of experimental treatments. But we could use emergency funds just to calm him down and avoid scandal. The director paused, thinking. Maybe that's the solution, but then we'll need a signed guarantee from him that he won't sue or go public. Yes, we can offer that as a compromise, but I'm afraid he'll still stab us in the back later and go public anyway. I agree, but let's try. So, they decided to negotiate with Arturo Alvarez. The patient was already settled in his VIP room, demanding special privileges, private meals from a restaurant, 24/7 care by a personal nurse, and so on. When the chief doctor and administrator entered, he greeted them with a disapproving glare. Well? Any progress? Did you find my meds? Not yet, the hospital director answered carefully, but we are doing everything possible to find out who took them and to recover them as soon as possible. Additionally, we'd like to discuss a compensation option. Compensation? Alvarez raised an eyebrow. You mean the clinic will pay for them? Yes, possibly in part or in full, Diego stepped in. We want to maintain a good relationship and ensure your treatment continues. Well, that's what I expected. The patient said triumphantly. You've got such a mess here, someone steals from a VIP room, and I'm the one suffering. The administrator nodded, trying not to show irritation. We deeply regret what's happened and are ready to cooperate. But we'd like your assurance that you won't spread negative information about our center. Why shouldn't I? Alvarez asked coldly. I have every reason to. We understand, Diego said quickly, but we want to resolve this peacefully. You'll get a new batch of medicine, and we'll cover the costs, partially or fully. In return, you promise not to file complaints. Arturo exhaled noisily, arms crossed, thinking. Let's say you buy the meds. But keep in mind, they're insanely expensive, and I need them now, not when you strike a deal with your suppliers. We understand the urgency, the director said. We have contacts and can get them within a day or two. That will only work for me if you also compensate me for moral damage, the patient added, pretending to be deeply hurt. My health is already deteriorating from the stress. Diego shuddered inside but kept calm. All right, let's resolve this within reason. Within reason? The patient smirked. Fine, we can sign an agreement. Just make sure nothing goes wrong. The clinic now faced a serious financial blow, but at least there was hope that Arturo Alvarez wouldn't make the scandal public. Though there were no guarantees. Meanwhile, Captain Lorenzo was walking through the clinic, speaking with various staff. He already believed Barbara had been framed, but who and why remained a mystery. The staff gave conflicting testimonies. Some said they saw someone suspicious in the hallway, others said they saw no one. Doctors, nurses, and orderlies all had access to the changing room, especially if they knew where the tools or lockpicks were stored. A few hours later, it was confirmed that the masked man hadn't been caught clearly on any other camera. Only one video showed him briefly heading toward the service elevator. There was a temporary blind spot due to renovation, and then the trail disappeared. Well organized, the captain concluded. Clearly an insider or someone with close connections to a staff member. Other steps needed to be taken. The police requested the list of staff on the morning shift. Everyone was asked to submit written explanations. Barbara was released for now, but warned she might be called in again. Relief was mixed with anxiety. Yes, it was clear she'd been set up, but the person capable of doing this was still out there. Who had stolen the medication and left cash and drugs in her backpack? That afternoon, the hospital director asked Barbara to come to his office. She arrived, still looking exhausted but trying to keep her posture straight and not show weakness. When she entered, Benjamin Benitez motioned to a chair and asked her to close the door. "Please, Barbara, have a seat." She sat down, uncertain of what to expect. "Barbara," he began with a deep sigh, "we now know you didn't organize this yourself, but the situation is still very serious. We've received several complaints from patients about your behavior." "Complaints?" Barbara was taken aback. "From which patients?" "You know we have many wealthy clients who are very particular about service. Recently, the suggestion book has had entries claiming you were rude or didn't maintain cleanliness in rooms. I don't know how truthful those are, but that's a lie," she exclaimed, heart racing. "I'm always polite with patients. I've never been rude." The hospital director shrugged doubtfully. "Maybe it's just pressure being applied to you. But understand, we're an elite clinic, and scandals are very damaging to us. Leadership is now faced with a choice, to suspend you temporarily or keep you with the risk that Arturo Alvarez stirs up more trouble." Barbara bit her lip, struggling to hold back tears. "So you want to fire me?" No, we're not talking about dismissal yet," the doctor softened. "But I'm afraid we'll have to suspend you during the official investigation. I can't take that risk. But I need the money. I have to help my mom," she murmured. "I understand, but you must also understand, this isn't a final decision. I hope within a week or two this situation clears up, the guilty party is found, and you'll return with your reputation restored." Barbara sat staring at the desk as a tear slid down her cheek. She felt betrayed and humiliated. But at the same time, she understood that the hospital director didn't want to fire her, he was simply under pressure. "How can this be?" she whispered. "I was framed, and yet I'm the one suffering. Barbara, please understand, I'm trying to preserve your position. But if we don't take any action, Arturo Alvarez will shout from every rooftop that our staff is involved in theft and that the clinic is doing nothing." "All right," she finally exhaled, realizing there was no point in arguing. "If that's the only way." The hospital director handed her a few documents to sign regarding her temporary suspension during the internal investigation. The terms stated she would receive a partial salary, but not her full wage. All Barbara could do was sign. Her hands trembled, her heart ached with hurt, but she had no choice. Leaving the office, she felt as if her world was falling apart. Rent still needed to be paid, as did the bills for her mother's hospital room. Even if partially covered, it was still a lot of money. And now she would be earning even less. All while being completely innocent. Bernardo found her in the changing room, where she was tearfully gathering her things. "Barbara, what happened?" he asked, seeing her state. "I've been suspended," she replied, stuffing her uniform into a bag. "They said it's temporary, just during the investigation, but I don't know how I'm going to live without money." Bernardo cursed quietly. "Damn, it's clear this is all pressure from Arturo Alvarez. Look, I don't know how to help you with the job situation, but there is something." "What is it?" she asked, trying to calm down. "I know someone. She used to work in the police and now does private investigation work. If you want, I can ask her to look into your case, try to find some leads. Maybe it'll help." "A private investigator? That must be expensive." "I'll try to work something out. She owes me a favor. At the very least, she might be able to give you some advice or point you in the right direction." Barbara thought for a few seconds, then nodded. Thank you, Bernardo. I don't even know where to turn anymore. If she can find out who the masked person is and help clear my name, I'll be endlessly grateful. And so, a new line of defense started forming in the young nurse's mind. If the police and the clinic security weren't making progress, maybe a private investigator could find something the officials had missed. All she could do now was hope and believe that this nightmare would eventually end. After gathering her belongings, Barbara left the clinic in silent despair. Her workday had ended early. Now she would have to stay at home and wait for the investigation to unfold. Continuing her shift was no longer an option. Her heart was heavy with sadness and fear. That evening, she sat in her small one-bedroom apartment on the city's outskirts, which she rented at a modest price. The apartment was simple but cozy and bright, with minimal furniture. Barbara always tried to keep everything tidy. It was the only sense of peace she had, order on the outside, even when there was chaos inside. She called her mother. This time, she picked up. A tired voice came through the static. Sweetheart, how are you? Sorry I couldn't answer earlier, I was in for a checkup. I'm fine, Mom, don't worry, Barbara replied as cheerfully as she could, though her voice trembled. How are you feeling? All right, more or less. The doctors say I need another procedure, but they hope to discharge me soon. But why do you sound so down? Oh, it's nothing. Work problems. I might be let go, but it's only temporary. Barbara didn't want to burden her mother with details, she already had enough on her plate. Don't be upset, it'll all work out, her mom reassured her. You're strong. Thanks, Mom. You get better too. I'll come visit you this weekend if I can. All right, dear. I'll be waiting. After ending the call, Barbara sat for a long time, staring into space. Her backpack sat on the table, now without the packets of drugs and money, which the police had confiscated. She sighed deeply, remembering how just yesterday she had carried that backpack around, unaware of the storm about to hit. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Barbara jumped, startled, then got up and cautiously approached. Who is it? It's me, Bernardo, she heard his muffled voice. Her heart skipped a beat. It was unexpected that he would come to her home. But without hesitation, she opened the door. Bernardo stood there with a bag of groceries in hand, smiling a little awkwardly. Hey! Sorry for dropping by unannounced. I just figured you probably don't feel like cooking, so I brought some stuff for dinner. Warmth spread through Barbara from his gesture, and she stepped aside to let him in. Thank you. This is so unexpected. I just didn't want you to be alone today, he said, placing the bag on the kitchen table. Besides, I have news. News? Barbara raised an eyebrow. Yeah. I called my friend. Her name is Elena. She agreed to meet with you tomorrow, to talk, maybe give you some advice on the investigation. Really? Barbara's eyes filled with gratitude. That's amazing, Bernardo. I don't even know how to thank you. No need, he smiled. Let's just make dinner first, and then we'll figure out what to do next. For the first time that day, Barbara felt a flicker of hope and warmth. Together with Bernardo, she began preparing dinner. They fried some chicken, chopped vegetables for a salad. There were some awkward moments. They had never spent time together outside the clinic. Yes, they had run into each other in the cafeteria, exchanged a few words, a smile here and there, but nothing more. And now, as Bernardo showed his care, Barbara noticed for the first time that he was kind, gentle, and that behind his shy smile was a deep sense of decency. They spoke in hushed tones at the table, not wanting to disturb the fragile intimacy that had quietly formed. Bernardo told her how he ended up working at the clinic. He had graduated from medical college and became a nurse because he needed to support his family. His father had been ill for years, and he had to care for his younger sister. Over time, he got used to the job. Even though dealing with difficult patients was tough at times, it was stable work with decent pay. And now this situation, he said, pushing his plate away. Not great, huh? Yeah, Barbara sighed. But thank you for being here. They sat in silence, tension lingered, but so did a quiet mutual support. Finally, Barbara changed the subject. Why do you think I was the target of the setup? Bernardo winced, thinking. Maybe because you were the one in the VIP room before the medication went missing. Someone had to be blamed. But why not the nurse? Arturo Alvarez had interactions with her too. It'd be harder to frame a nurse with drugs and money, her role's more senior, she's connected to doctors and record logs. Plus, the patient was used to her. But an orderly, it's easier to dump the blame on someone lower down. Barbara nodded in understanding, though the logic only deepened her bitterness. They talked for another 10 minutes, trying to think through all the angles, what to ask Elena, what steps to take next. The cozy kitchen, with steam rising from a pot on the stove and evening shadows thickening outside the window, gave a false sense of peace. When the clock neared 11, Bernardo stood up, realizing it was time to leave so as not to overstay. He put on his jacket and headed to the door. Barbara followed. Thanks again, for dinner and for everything, she said softly, eyes lowered a little in embarrassment. He smiled and lightly touched her hand. Hang in there, okay? I'll call tomorrow and tell you when you can meet Elena. All right. Good night. Good night. Barbara closed the door, sighed, and felt a strange mix of fear for tomorrow and a glimmer of warmth and hope tied to Bernardo's presence. Maybe this ordeal would lead her not only to justice, but to something more personal. She quickly tidied up the kitchen, turned off the lights, crawled under the blanket, and tried to sleep. But for hours, she tossed and turned, imagining the masked man's face rifling through her backpack. She worried how much this theft would cost the clinic and feared the administration might still decide to fire her. Only at dawn did her exhausted nerves finally give in to sleep. The next day, Barbara woke closer to noon. She didn't need to go to work, she was suspended. An anxious emptiness gripped her chest. She had a breakfast of coffee and leftovers from the previous night, then sat down to check her phone. It turned out that colleagues had been messaging her, some offering support, some asking for details, others just out of curiosity. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Bernardo. Hey, Barbara, how are you? Hey. Hanging in there. You? I just finished my morning shift, heading over to Elena's. She's ready to meet you at 3 p.m. at a cafe. Does that work? Yes, of course. I can make it. Great. I'll pick you up around 2:30. Okay, thank you. Hanging up, Barbara felt a flutter of nerves. Today, something would finally happen, a chance to learn something new. She chose simple clothes, jeans and a sweater, tied her hair in a ponytail to look neat, and headed outside around 2:50. Bernardo pulled up in an old silver sedan, rolled down the window, and smiled. Hey! Hop in, let's go. Barbara got into the passenger seat. Bernardo smelled faintly of inexpensive cologne and a trace of tobacco. She knew he had quit smoking, but it seemed he still sneaked a cigarette now and then. Thank you for helping me, she said as the car pulled away. No need to thank me. You're in this mess because of that idiot who, well, that criminal. How's the clinic today? She asked. Oh, you know. Arturo Alvarez is still complaining that they haven't found his meds. There's a rumor the clinic's already ordered him a new batch and is going to pay for it. Management is nervous, but otherwise, things are quiet. Barbara knew that calm could break at any moment if new details emerged. They drove mostly in silence, each lost in thought. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a cozy little cafe. Inside, it was spacious with soft colors and a few tables by the windows. At one of them sat a woman in her mid-30s, wearing a navy pantsuit, short hair, and sharp brown eyes. When she saw Bernardo, she raised a hand in greeting. Elena, hi, said Bernardo as they approached. Hey, the woman gave a small smile and nodded. You must be Barbara? Yes. Nice to meet you. Barbara replied, shaking her hand. They all sat down and ordered coffee. Elena squinted slightly, studying Barbara. Bernardo gave me a brief overview, but I'd like to hear everything directly from you. Will you tell me? Barbara recounted the story. Expensive medication went missing from a VIP patient, and she was accused and forced to open her backpack. Inside were found money and drugs. Later, surveillance footage showed an unknown masked person. Elena listened attentively, her chin resting on her hand. She asked a few clarifying questions: where the locker room was located, what the package of money looked like, and exactly where the bag of drugs had been placed. I see, she finally said, taking a sip of coffee. I have a few theories. First, someone is stealing expensive medications, selling them illegally, and decided to frame the first convenient scapegoat, you, Barbara. Choosing an orderly makes sense: access, the ability to slip into a room unnoticed. Yes, that's what we're thinking too, Barbara nodded. But I'm also curious, why plant photos of you with your ex-husband? Was someone trying to throw you off, or maybe hint at your connection to someone? Could your ex really have ties to drug trafficking and someone's trying to mislead the police? I don't know. We had a bad breakup, but he was never involved with drugs, although he did have debts. Elena nodded. Could he or one of his friends be seeking revenge? For what? We broke up ages ago. Unless, Barbara paused, thinking. Maybe he held a grudge. But I don't believe that. All right. Second theory, someone is targeting you specifically to ruin your life for someone else's gain, for example, to free up your position at the clinic or damage the hospital director's reputation, making it look like he can't control his staff. That would mean digging deeper, Bernardo interjected. But how do we know who it could be? First, we need to find out who had access to the locker room and who knew the camera layout, Elena replied. Also, who recently handled the medications that went missing. I know the police are likely doing this too, but they're slow. I can act more flexibly. And how can we help? Barbara asked, looking at her with hope. I'll need a list of all staff working morning to afternoon shifts, Elena said without hesitation. Also, I need access, or at least details, about the medications, how they're stored, who signs for them. And I'd like to review that security footage in detail. I think I can get you that footage, Bernardo nodded. I've got a friend in the security department who might help. Perfect. Elena smiled with satisfaction. Maybe I'll spot something others missed. Barbara felt a small spark of hope ignite within her. This woman looked professional and confident. She wasn't from the police, but she clearly knew which threads to pull. Thank you for taking this on, Barbara said sincerely. I'm afraid I can't pay you for your services. Don't worry about it. Elena waved her hand. I normally work for a fee, but since Bernardo is an old friend, I'll give you a discount. And if I'm lucky, I'll uncover some interesting info I can use for my own purposes. Let's just say I have arrangements with certain people. Barbara frowned slightly, unsure what that meant, but chose not to ask. The important thing was, the investigator had agreed to help. So, what's the plan? Bernardo asked. Here's the plan, Elena said, setting down her cup and launching into what sounded like a practiced strategy. Today I'll try to review the footage you get me, Bernardo. Tomorrow, I'll go to the clinic posing as a potential patient or visitor to scope things out and chat with the staff. Barbara, I need you to write a list of people you interacted with the most, anyone who may have had a grudge against you. Even minor conflicts. Okay, Barbara nodded, opening her phone to start taking notes. Then I'll dig into what medication went missing from your patient, Elena continued. If it's as expensive as you say, it could be a targeted theft, the kind where the drugs are sold on the black market for a lot of money. Makes sense. Barbara agreed. It's an imported, unique drug. Professor Borrego prescribed it. All the more reason. Elena's eyes sparkled. So, let's find out who could be connected to the black market for medical drugs. She finished her coffee and stood, signaling the meeting was over. She exchanged numbers with Barbara and agreed Bernardo would send the footage. It had all gone quickly, clearly, and professionally. When Elena left, Barbara glanced at Bernardo with a slightly dazed expression. "She's really professional." "Yeah," he agreed. "Let's hope this works." And so began a new phase in Barbara's fight for her innocence. On her way home, she felt like she finally had an ally, and that gave her a small sense of confidence. Meanwhile, back at the clinic, where a regular workday was underway, tension still lingered in the air. The hospital director had already discussed with management the idea of purchasing new medication for the patient using the reserve fund. It meant a financial loss for the clinic, but it would buy time and help prevent a public scandal. There was no guarantee Arturo Alvarez wouldn't stir up more trouble later, but it was better than an immediate reputation crisis. The police were still roaming the hallways, interviewing staff. Some employees were nervous, worried they might fall under suspicion, and acted tense. The more talkative ones began whispering, speculating who the masked figure could be. That evening, Bernardo managed to get the video footage fragment from his security contact and sent it to Elena. She replied, "Perfect, we start tomorrow." The night passed relatively calmly. In the morning, Elena dressed in elegant but low-key clothing and slightly changed her hairstyle to blend in as a visitor. At the reception, she said she wanted information about private services for a family member, and they let her in. She casually wandered the hallways, occasionally stopping at the front desk to ask about procedure costs. No one suspected that she was carefully observing every detail: camera placement, exits, elevators, staircases, even fire extinguishers. She struck up a conversation with one of the nurses, introducing herself as a potential patient looking for a diagnostic checkup. She asked about the VIP rooms, what doctors were there, what conditions were like. The nurse explained, unaware that it was all part of information gathering. Elena learned the daily routine, who handled medication distribution. Later, she managed to briefly catch the hospital director in the hallway and approached him with a smile, requesting a consultation. He politely brushed her off, but she smoothly steered the conversation elsewhere. "Excuse me, you're the director, right? My name is Esmeralda Lopez. I'm thinking of bringing my father here for diagnosis, but I wanted to ask, is everything secure here? I heard rumors about some missing medication." The director frowned. "Where did you hear that? Those are false rumors. Everything's already been resolved. This is one of the best medical centers in the city." "Oh, I believe you, of course," Elena smiled, pretending to be reassured. "It's just, sometimes the newspapers exaggerate. Please understand, our security is top-notch. What happened was an isolated incident, and we've already taken action," the director said curtly. "Excuse me, I'm in a hurry." He walked off, and Elena concluded that the administration clearly didn't want any publicity. On the first floor, near the security office, she spotted Bernardo. With just a glance, he indicated everything was fine and quickly walked past to avoid suspicion. Elena managed to discreetly overhear a few staff conversations. "Do you think it was Nurse Eugenia?" "No, she's too quiet." "What if it was the new orderly?" "I heard he's in debt." And so on. The gossip wasn't specific, but it confirmed a general atmosphere of distrust. After a couple more hours of observing and collecting information, Elena left. That same day, she called Barbara. "Hi. I have a few leads, people I want to talk to. There's a female orderly with a seriously ill child. Apparently, she's in debt. She might have had a motive. There's also a male nurse with a sketchy job history. And your administrator, Diego, has a reputation for scheming. There are rumors he has ties to pharmaceutical companies." "Diego?" Barbara was surprised. "He's always polite and courteous." "Then he's a good diplomat," Elena smirked. "But I'm not saying it's him, just that I'll check." Barbara felt the investigator was moving fast. All she could do was wait and hope. Meanwhile, the day turned to evening. Sitting in her apartment, Barbara was on the verge of despair. Money was running low, and her mother's phone calls were becoming more and more worrying. Her condition wasn't improving, and more tests were needed, which meant more expenses. That night, Barbara had a nightmare. She was walking through the clinic hallway again, the masked person following her. Then he turned into Daniel, her ex, laughing while holding a teddy bear with a ripped-off arm. She woke up drenched in sweat. The next morning, Barbara called Elena. "Listen, I just heard something. Someone told me that my ex-husband showed up in town a few months ago. He might have connections with someone at the clinic. I can't reveal my source yet, but it's unsettling." "Damn." Barbara groaned. "I don't know anything about him anymore." "Yeah, but we'll need to look into it. Do you remember if Daniel had any friends or acquaintances who worked in medicine?" Barbara thought for a moment. "He had a friend, Federico. He used to be a paramedic. But I have no idea where he is now." "Good, that's something," Elena replied. "I'll try to find Federico. If the two of them were working together, that could be a crucial lead." All Barbara could do was sigh and agree. The deeper this went, the stranger it all became. Could her ex really be involved? Days passed. The police officially announced they had not yet found the culprit. Arturo Alvarez continued pressuring the clinic, and it finally agreed to order a new batch of medication at its own expense. Barbara hadn't been summoned for further questioning, but neither had she been reinstated at work. Her situation remained in limbo, but inside her, a flicker of hope remained, thanks to Elena. At one point, the investigator invited Barbara to her office. It turned out to be a small room in a business center, with case folders on the walls, a laptop on the desk, and a small safe. Elena collected more details from Barbara: family background, mutual acquaintances with her ex, anything potentially useful. "Sorry if my questions are tough," Elena said when she saw how hard it was for Barbara to talk about the past, "but this could be important." "I understand," the girl replied quietly. "It's just painful to revisit it all." As Barbara left the office, she nearly ran into Diego, the clinic administrator, who was coming up the same stairs. He recognized her immediately. "Oh, hello, Barbara. What are you doing here?" She froze for a moment. "Just running errands." "And you?" "Business as well," he said shortly, glancing toward the office door she had just exited. "Sorry, I'm in a hurry." And he quickly walked away, leaving Barbara confused. What was Diego doing in the same business center where Elena's office was? Coincidence, or something more? Barbara immediately called the investigator to ask. Elena was surprised. "Diego's there? That's odd, but it could just be coincidence. There are a lot of offices in that building. I'll look into whether he's connected to any of them." Thoughts that the administrator might have been working behind her back wouldn't leave Barbara alone. She remembered several times when Diego spoke to her coldly. Some colleagues had even hinted at shady connections he might have. But those could have just been rumors. A new day brought yet another twist. Barbara was visited by her ex-husband, Daniel. It happened in the morning, just as she was about to have breakfast. The doorbell rang, and there he was, recognizably older, thinner, with longer hair and a tense look in his eyes. "You?" Barbara gasped, gripping the doorframe. "Hi." Daniel shoved his hands into his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. "Can I come in?" "What for?" Barbara asked warily, a chill running down her spine. "I need to talk to you. I heard you're in trouble." "I swear I had nothing to do with it." Barbara was so stunned that she stepped aside silently, letting him in. Daniel walked into the kitchen and looked around like he was returning to an apartment he once lived in. "It's still so cozy here," he noted, attempting a smile. "Can we not talk about cozy?" she snapped, slamming the door. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you left the city." "Yeah, I did. But I came back a couple of months ago, had some unfinished business. Then I heard you got into some kind of trouble, drugs, they said." "I didn't get into anything," she interrupted, outraged. "I was framed." "I know," he raised a hand in a peace gesture. I want to help however I can. Why now? We haven't spoken in forever. Her voice was filled with hurt. You vanished and left me with debts. I had to manage on my own. And now you want to help? Daniel exhaled heavily and sat down on a stool. I know I did you wrong. I really do. But believe me, I had nothing to do with the drugs and cash they found in your backpack. Then why was there a photo of us in there? Barbara blurted out. Daniel furrowed his brows. What photo? The one where we're sitting together in front of the bookshelves. Remember? It was planted in my bag. No idea, he said, genuinely confused. Maybe someone wanted you to suspect me. Barbara stared at him for a moment. He seemed genuinely baffled, or he was just a really good actor. Fine, she said with a frown. Why did you come? I heard some expensive medications were stolen, and you were accused. I have a contact who can check if those meds have surfaced on the black market. A contact? Barbara tensed. Weren't you once involved in criminal stuff? Daniel flinched. Yeah, I was. But I've stayed away from it. Still, I've got a few connections. I can ask around. Maybe we'll find out who's behind this. And what's in it for you? She asked suspiciously. Maybe I just want to make amends, he said bitterly. We're not complete strangers. Barbara hesitated, then quietly said, Fine. If you can really help, do it. But don't think I trust you 100%. Understood, Daniel nodded. I'll talk to people, see if anyone's moving those meds. If I find anything, I'll let you know. All right. He slowly stood and headed to the door. Before leaving, he turned and said quietly, Barbara, I'm sorry for how things ended. She didn't reply. She closed the door behind him and stood for several minutes, leaning against the frame, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Did he really come to help, or was he spying? But since he offered help, why not take advantage? She immediately called Elena and told her about Daniel's visit. The investigator sounded surprised but said, Well, that's interesting. If he really digs into his old contacts, he might find something useful. But be careful, Barbara. He could be playing both sides. So, Barbara had yet another potential lead. She didn't know if it would lead to the truth, but she clung to every thread. On the third day after that visit, news came in. Arturo Alvarez had received new medication, paid for by the clinic. He calmed down and dropped the idea of filing a complaint with the health ministry. Management breathed a sigh of relief, but the hospital director knew the real problem remained unsolved. The thief was still out there, and staff trust had been shaken. Barbara waited anxiously for updates from Elena. That evening, the investigator called. Hey, I've got something. I talked to a few staff members. Turns out a new employee recently joined the accounting department. His name is Fernando. He frequently hangs around with Diego. I was told they often have lunch together and whisper about things. Since all financial operations go through accounting, it's possible they organized the theft. You think Diego and Fernando framed me? Barbara asked, shocked. I can't say for sure, Elena replied, but I suspect that accounting could have been used to cover up the drug sale, or at least to discreetly handle some payments. I'll ask Bernardo to dig into them. Okay, Barbara said, listening carefully, not wanting to miss a detail. And my ex came by. He offered to help. Yeah, interesting. Maybe he really will find whoever is selling the stolen meds. The next day, Bernardo called Barbara and told her he'd heard something from the staff. Fernando, the accountant, was indeed a mysterious figure. No one knew much about him. He'd arrived about 2 weeks before the incident. When asked about his previous job, he gave vague answers. Diego had once mentioned hiring a great guy to handle the numbers. Maybe it's all a coincidence, Bernardo said cautiously. But admit it, it's strange. They decided Elena would try to dig up more information on Fernando, where he lived, where he used to work. Meanwhile, Bernardo would discreetly ask around. Barbara, though still suspended, asked him to pay close attention to anything Diego said. Another day passed. Barbara, sitting at home, was nearly sick with anxiety. Finally, that evening, the doorbell rang again. Bernardo stood there. "Hey," he greeted her with a tired smile. "Got news." Elena found out Fernando has a criminal record for forging documents in another region. Apparently, he changed his name and is now hiding. Whoa! Barbara's eyes widened. And someone like that got hired at our clinic? Looks like he used a fake name or bribed the right people. Either way, there's reason to suspect he's involved. Barbara listened with a pounding heart. If Fernando was a fraud, he could very well have orchestrated the theft. But how to prove it? Elena said she's contacting her police connections to report that Fernando might be wanted. Maybe they'll arrest him, and then we'll know everything, Bernardo added. If that's true, it could save me, Barbara said quietly, hope blooming inside her. I really hope so, Bernardo smiled. By the way, have you eaten? No, I'm not very hungry. Want to go to the store and grab something? I'll help you cook. Barbara nodded, and once again they found themselves in a comforting and formal rhythm, buying groceries, chatting about everyday things, escaping the nightmare of the past few days. That night, they watched an old movie together, and for a moment, Barbara felt her worries fade. Inside, she felt growing gratitude, and maybe even affection, for Bernardo. The next morning, Daniel called. He sounded agitated. Listen, I asked around. There's supposedly a shipment of expensive meds being moved to another city. I got a time and place. Maybe it's the stolen batch. Really? Where? When? Barbara jumped up. Tonight. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. But it's dangerous with gang territory. What should we do? Her voice trembled. We need to call the police. Wait. If you just report it, they might vanish, and you might be blamed. Let me check it out first. I'm scared, she whispered. For you, and for me. It'll be fine, he said, though his voice hinted at doubt. I'll call when I know more. After the call, Barbara realized she was at the heart of something huge. If Daniel uncovered the operation, the real criminals could be exposed, and she'd be exonerated. But the risk was great. She immediately informed Elena. The investigator listened and said, If your ex really wants to go, let him, but I'll notify my police contact. Maybe they'll organize a sting operation. Barbara was grateful Elena didn't dismiss Daniel's help, but instead chose to use every available lead. Her heart pounded faster than usual. Could this really all be over tonight? The day passed in agonizing anticipation. Toward evening, Barbara was on edge. Elena called and told her the police were on their way to the warehouse, but it was unclear if they'd get there in time. When Bernardo found out, he offered to come over so she wouldn't be alone. Come, she whispered over the phone, not hiding her anxiety. He agreed, and by 8 p.m., he was at her door. Barbara was visibly shaken, but Bernardo brought a sweet pie and gently urged her to eat something. Don't panic, he said softly. The police are aware, Elena is on it, and Daniel knows what he's doing. But he could get hurt, she sighed. And I don't want him to die. I understand. Around 10 p.m., Barbara's phone vibrated. It was Elena. Yes, Elena? What's going on? She asked, frozen in place. The investigator sounded agitated, almost shouting. Car noise and police chatter echoed in the background. Barbara, we're here with the police. Some guys really showed up with boxes. We caught 2 of them, but Fernando's not among them. Damn. One car is escaping. There were shouts, sirens, then the connection broke. Barbara looked at Bernardo in confusion. Seems like they caught some of them, but someone got away. A few minutes later, Elena called back. They escaped, but part of the shipment was seized. And among the boxes was the exact medication that was stolen from Arturo Alvarez. So I'm innocent, Barbara whispered with relief. That's already clear, the investigator confirmed. The police are deploying extra units to try to catch the fleeing car. It's obvious the criminals had inside help. Someone from the clinic gave them everything they needed. But we don't yet know who. And Daniel? Barbara clutched the phone. Your ex? I saw him here. I think he ran after the escaping car. I'm not sure. I'll let you know if I find out more. The call dropped. Barbara and Bernardo exchanged stunned glances. The stolen medicine had been found, at least in part. That meant the police would soon uncover the clinic accomplices. Barbara could finally be cleared, but she still worried about Daniel. An hour later, he called. He was out of breath. Barbara, I'm okay. I'm safe. The car got away. I tried to follow, but it was pointless. But the police arrested some guys, so the truth is coming out. Thank you, she said with relief. Please, be careful. Yeah, sure. I hope things get easier for you now. There was a scraping sound, then the call cut off. Barbara didn't know what to think, but deep down, she was grateful to Daniel. That night, she slept more peacefully than she had in days. The evidence was finally stacking up in her favor. In the morning, Barbara woke up to a call from Elena. Well, you can breathe now. The theft case has been officially solved. You're no longer a suspect. 2 people have been arrested. They were working for a supplier. Unfortunately, the ringleader is still free, and it's someone from inside the clinic. The arrested ones aren't talking, they're scared. But my name is cleared, right? Barbara asked again. Yes, absolutely. The investigator said there are no claims against you. So go demand your job back. Barbara nearly jumped for joy. Finally, she called the hospital director. He asked her to come in. When she arrived, he looked somber and embarrassed, but smiled. Barbara, congratulations. You've been officially exonerated. I want to personally apologize, on behalf of myself and the management, for suspending you. You have to understand, it was a difficult situation. I understand, she said quietly, though her heart still held some hurt. Will you take me back? Of course. You can start work tomorrow, and we'll compensate you for the missed days, our way of making amends. Barbara could barely hold back tears of joy and gratitude. Thank you, Senor Benitez. Thank you for not holding a grudge, he replied. And thank you for not leaving the clinic. I hope you'll continue working with us. She left his office feeling that the nightmare was finally coming to an end. The ringleader still had to be found, but that was up to the police. Overjoyed, Barbara called Bernardo. They reinstated me. That's amazing, she heard a joyful voice in response. Let's celebrate tonight. Let's do it, she smiled. However, her joy was mixed with a lingering question. If the internal accomplice hadn't been found yet, wasn't there still a danger he might try to harm her, or someone else, again? That same day, closer to evening, Barbara was walking through the clinic's corridor. She had come to sign some paperwork regarding her return to work when she suddenly locked eyes with Diego, the administrator. He looked tense, as though he wanted to say something but remained silent. He appeared exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. As she walked past him, she overheard him hissing into the phone, Yes, I understand. I'll do it. A few hours later, Barbara was questioned by police. They wanted to know whether she'd ever seen Diego or Fernando acting suspiciously. She answered honestly, Diego had always seemed strict, but no more than that, and she barely knew Fernando at all. On her way out, she received a text from Elena. Fernando's gone. The police just tried to question him, but he vanished. Seems he realized he was exposed. Barbara's heart skipped a beat. If he ran, it meant he was guilty. But what now? Could Diego be connected to him? The next morning, the clinic was buzzing with the news that Fernando hadn't shown up for work. Police were searching for him and checking his address, but he hadn't been seen. Doctors and nurses were all talking. Maybe Fernando was the main culprit, or at least an accomplice, and the true mastermind was still unknown. Back at work, Barbara tried to focus on her duties, but her thoughts kept spinning. While walking down a corridor, she was intercepted by Arturo Alvarez. "Oh, it's you again," he said, without his usual aggression. "I heard you were cleared. Well, is anyone going to take responsibility for my ruined health?" Barbara met his gaze evenly. "I'm glad you received your medication. I hope you recover soon. And yes, I was cleared." Her voice carried a hint of pride. She hadn't forgotten the pain of being falsely accused. The patient just scoffed and walked away, waving dismissively, seemingly content now that the clinic had paid for everything. That evening, just as Barbara was about to leave, Bernardo caught up with her. "Hey, I got a message from Elena," he said. "They found a trail showing Fernando transferred money to an offshore account. There's a strong chance it's from the sale of the stolen meds. But have they caught him yet?" Barbara tensed. "Not yet. Police are still searching." "And Diego, are they investigating him too?" "Yes. He's been questioned, but he denies everything. Claims he didn't know about Fernando's criminal record and that he hired him through a staffing agency." Barbara frowned, feeling that it still wasn't over. But the most important thing was that she was back at work and no longer a suspect. The rest would be handled by law enforcement and Elena. The next evening, Barbara had a meeting with Elena and Daniel, who also wanted to share what he had uncovered. They met at the same cafe. Elena was already at a table, flipping through some printed pages. "Well," she said as they all sat and placed their orders, "I've got news. The police are nearly certain that Fernando was one of the main players in the theft. But he had help, someone inside the clinic who gave him access to documents, helped with distribution, and then framed Barbara to divert suspicion." Daniel asked curiously, "And who's the inside contact?" "I'm afraid it's likely the administrator, Diego," Elena said. "There's indirect evidence, phone records, connections to pharmaceutical suppliers, but nothing concrete yet." Barbara asked, "But why would he do all this?" "Money," Elena said bluntly. "Selling those meds on the black market brings in a fortune. He probably used Fernando as a front and blamed you to deflect suspicion." Barbara shuddered at the thought that the man who always smiled at her and said, "Good day," Barbara could so coldly try to destroy her life. "But if the police can't arrest him yet, it means he's still working and could try something again," Daniel remarked. "Exactly," Elena agreed. "Now that Fernando's gone, Diego might lay low or try to run." "What do you suggest?" Barbara asked. Elena shook her head. "That's for the police now. They're gathering evidence, investigating his contacts. I consider my job done, helping to clear your name. But if more proof against Diego is needed, we'll do what we can." "Thank you," Barbara said, squeezing the investigator's hand. "You've done so much for me." "Anytime," Elena smiled. The conversation turned lighter. They discussed a few more details and then parted ways, agreeing to stay in touch. Daniel, saying goodbye to Barbara, mentioned he was leaving town. He had things to take care of elsewhere. Barbara felt mixed emotions, gratitude for his help, but also the sting of old wounds. He made it clear he wasn't coming back to her life. This might have been their final conversation. Bernardo walked Barbara home, and they stopped outside her building. It was already dark, and the street lamp bathed them in soft yellow light. "Well, I guess it's all finally winding down," he said with a smile. "I'm so happy you're back at work." "Me too." Barbara looked at him, warmth rising inside her. "Thank you. Without you and Elena, I wouldn't have made it." "Ah, come on," he blushed. "I just wanted to help." They fell into a silence that wasn't awkward, just calm, peaceful. Their eyes met, growing warmer and closer. Then Barbara leaned in slightly, and Bernardo, a little hesitantly, hugged her. In that moment, all the hardships of the past few weeks melted away, replaced by something gentle and real. Want to come in for tea? Barbara asked softly, blushing but not looking away. Yeah, I'd love to, Bernardo smiled, and they entered the building together, feeling that a new chapter was beginning. One that promised peace, kindness, and maybe happiness. Weeks passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Barbara worked, helped care for her mother, who was finally discharged, and spent more time with Bernardo. Meanwhile, police finally tracked down Fernando. He was trying to cross the border with forged documents. He was arrested on the spot. Under pressure from the evidence, he confessed that he had acted under the guidance of someone in the clinic and handed over money, but he refused to name names, likely out of fear. Diego was still at the clinic, acting cautious and trying to stay under the radar. But he was nervous, fearing further questioning, and had already hired a lawyer. The police were closing in, and then, what everyone had been waiting for finally happened. Diego was arrested at the clinic when he showed up for work. Staff were shocked. Those who saw him being led away in handcuffs said his face was pale and his hands trembled. The investigation uncovered financial documents confirming his involvement in the scheme. Several of Fernando's acquaintances confessed that Diego was the key figure. Everything fell into place. He wanted to profit from the expensive medications and eliminate potential witnesses. Barbara had been a convenient scapegoat. She had been in the room just before the meds went missing and didn't have powerful connections until the investigator and Bernardo stepped in. After Diego's arrest, the clinic underwent major reforms. Management reviewed security procedures, enforced stricter controls on medication access, and increased monitoring of changing rooms and corridors. The hospital director learned his lesson, and the clinic began paying even more attention to patients to avoid future scandals. Barbara became more than just an orderly. She was recognized as a loyal and capable worker who remained committed even in the worst circumstances. She was offered a promotion to junior nurse if she agreed to take some additional courses. For her, this wasn't just a career step, it was a symbol of redemption and respect. So, are you going to take the offer? Bernardo asked one day as they ate in the clinic's cafeteria. I don't know, Barbara smiled. I like what I do. And if there's a chance to grow, why not? Awesome, he said excitedly. I'll be your biggest fan when you become a nurse. Thank you, she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. And so ended a story that began with a terrible accusation and threatened to destroy a young woman's life. Now, she was rebuilding that life, step by step, with new opportunities and a hopeful future beside the man who stood by her through it all. And what about Arturo Alvarez? He continued his treatment, showed positive progress, and was eventually discharged. Before leaving, he couldn't resist a snide remark to the administration, "You're still a mess in here." But he made no further complaints. He had been given everything he needed, and even enjoyed luxury conditions. The clinic decided not to provoke him and gave him a grand farewell. Barbara only saw him briefly as he left in his luxury car. She felt no resentment. After all, it was over. Months later, a court found Diego and Fernando guilty of large-scale theft of medical property and attempted document forgery. Barbara was officially recognized as the victim and received a monetary settlement from the clinic for moral damages. But the real victory was this: her name was completely cleared, and she rediscovered her purpose, both professionally and personally, thanks to her bond with Bernardo. Thus came to a logical conclusion the mystery that began when a 40-something VIP patient accused a 29-year-old orderly of stealing his medication, never suspecting the complex web of corruption surrounding those drugs. The contents of her backpack had been only the tip of the iceberg. But truth prevailed, and now Barbara is building a new life, step by step, leaving behind the darkest days when the entire clinic froze in disbelief over her open bag, and she thought her world had collapsed. Now, it's all behind her, and ahead lies only light, the job she needs, her mother's restored health, and a new love.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.